Okay, welcome everybody. Just like we did for the first game, we're gonna go through the character rankings of Shinobi Versus, but with a little bit more of a twist this time. We're gonna split this up into two parts. The first one being about the leaders, because I've been hearing a lot about the dynamics between the leaders, right? Or two in particular. Ever since I started playing the crossover game and I had first identified Asuka as a main character, people told me that there was some contention between Asuka and Yumi. And I've been wondering why that is, and we finally got to this game. Now, apparently from what people told me, problems with Yumi happened later. But I think we're at a crucial point where the developers might have made some decisions, and I kind of want to talk about if those decisions were correct or not, while also talking about how I felt about the characters as well. So why don't we start off by just unveiling the ranks. We have, starting from the bottom, Miyabi is at 15th, Asuka is at 12th, Homura is at 11th, and Yumi is number 1.
Wow.
Let me first start off by saying this. After having played the entire game, the only one that kind of catches me off guard is Yumi's. So yes, that is both me saying at the same time that A, one of my top 2, I am surprised, well, slightly surprised, is number 1. But I can also see it. But I'm also saying that Homura's ranking, my other, one of my top 2s, makes sense. Hopefully that catches people's attention and makes it to where people know I try to be more objective with this, right? Yeah, I'm saying that one of my favorites, which the one that convinced me to continue the game, being number 11th makes sense. Let's start with Homura first. There are a couple of reasons on why I say Homura's ranking makes sense. And I'm gonna kind of switch back and forth between the first two. The first reason I'm going to talk about has to do with me making the video on the main 4 by themselves. What it takes to be a main character, or really a good main character. You see, Homura in the Hanzo and Hebijo route of Burst Renewal was very on point. Homura had a goal, a drive, a reason for doing the actions that she wanted to do. She was leading her team into further realizing those goals, and in her own route, she had a lot of heartwarming moments with her team leading up until the end, where she ends up saving them all. And her being able to draw her sword was a representation of how much she has allowed herself to care for those people, where her true strength lies. And then all 5 of them become renegades because, well, essentially they're bond as a team. Homura did something for them, and they weren't going to let her just take the blame by herself, so they all went together. Very heartwarming moment, in my opinion, but that's not about Homura herself strictly, but it's involved. Compared to that, in this game, Homura seemed just kind of there for the most part. Not only that, but seemed to be reduced to, I think it's fair to say, well, not necessarily Asuka's lover, but the best word I have is Asuka fangirl, I guess. Mainly most of Homura's actions were revolved around Asuka, in which the team was kind of dragged into that as well. I'm not saying that that's strictly a bad thing, but she didn't really have a goal in this game. She was kind of just wandering aimlessly. And here's where we get to an important part. That matters because I asked you all in preparation for this video a long time ago, what was your first Senran Kagura game? Most people did not say either the first game or Burst Renewal. So most people did not start with the origin of the series, meaning, well, again, I have a very small sample size, all right, considering my channel, but I'm thinking that, especially after seeing what the actual first game, because Burst Renewal wouldn't have come out when this poll was out, so assuming just literally the first game, seeing the gameplay and all that, I think they've made some significant improvements from that game to Versus when it comes to gameplay. It's quite possible that this game helped put it on the map. And Estebal, I think, is even more popular than this one from what I see on YouTube and other stuff. So what I'm basically trying to say is this game could have been the first encounter with the characters in question. So if this is your first encounter with Homura and you have none of Burst Renewal to back her up, I think she can seem quite bland. Not to mention where Homura truly does start finding her way again after Hanzo gives her a goal. That requires you to play all the other 3 routes. And I've mentioned before how in 3 Houses, well, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, which I'm not going to spoil anything. It's not something you need to know for context. I'm just saying that's a game where you can play multiple routes, but I was assuming that the developers aren't assuming that everybody's going to play each and every route. I think that's something also safe to say with this game as well. I am not certain that every single person who played this game is going to play every single route. Especially since the stories are so similar, people might play 1 or 2 and then they say, oh, okay, the story is mostly the same, just different perspectives, and decide that they're done with the game. Might not even get to this point. So if that's the case and they only play 2 out of 3 of the routes, then that means there's a good chance if there's one character they weren't going to meet, it would be Homura and the Crimson Squad in their own route, that is. You meet every character through every route, but there's a difference between meeting them from afar and then going through their actual route. So with all that said, Homura being 11th makes sense. Kind of in the middle, you know, it's kind of a, I don't want to say a meh feeling. I still enjoyed Homura a lot, especially, you know, towards the end. But I had previous knowledge to go off on. If this was a lot of people's first time seeing Homura, I can definitely see how Homura's spot makes sense. So that being said, if that's the feeling I get with Homura, then why is Asuka below Homura and why is Miyabi even further? I think I'll actually start with Miyabi next, because I actually think, unlike Homura, Miyabi started off really strong. We had a different take in how the story would go. In fact, it seems to start right after the first game. We get to see Miyabi's backstory in the game, which also kind of tugs at your heartstrings. We get to see Miyabi trying to gather a crew together to accomplish a goal. I think Miyabi had a lot of the very good beginnings when it comes to making an interesting route, as well as being a good main character. The problem is Miyabi's route itself. I don't think I need to explain that having a character take out the other characters that people would probably favor is not the best look when it comes to liking a character. I've seen that happen in the Neptunia series with Nepgear, and that was for an understandable reason, although I think done even harsher than this. Well, no, there's no doubt about it. Like, it was done a lot harsher in that game. But still, the point is, I think Miyabi was hurt for the simple fact of they're taking out the other teams, and their reason for doing so was because they wanted to restore the honor of Heavy Joe. And if people are familiar with the story of how Heavy Joe went down, then you know that there's really no purpose. Like, there was no honor in what Dogen was doing, and Homura actually taking Dogen down, you know, that was more honorable than trying to uphold that corruptness. Nor do I think Miyabi had any lessons to learn. Miyabi got a more concrete goal in becoming a Kagura, and that drew her backstory, and I think that was good. But they tried to make some sort of friendship thing, like Miyabi didn't realize the friends that are around her, but she seemed pretty solid to me. Even though Ryobi and Riona were trying to, you know, take her out the picture, Miyabi still seemed to try to get them included. So I didn't really see that Miyabi really had a friendship issue. But yeah, I just think simply from her attacking the other teams alone, that's where her place ended up with. But I think there was a lot of potential there that it would have been interesting to see if they didn't take that route. Now with those two out of the way, now I get to the two that are interesting, because I mentioned before, I have been waiting for this video because I wanted to see what was this deal with Asuka and... Oh no! Yumi. I'll speak briefly on Asuka first, not the full thing, but I kind of feel like I need to talk about them both in tandem, but we'll start with Asuka. Asuka, unlike the first game where there were, some moments where I had very big issues with how the story is being told, those frustrations were gone in this game, which was such a relief until, they actually brought them back up. Of course, every time they bring them back up, I'm gonna mention it, but I saw no weird moment where it seemed like Asuka was being put on a pedestal that didn't seem right, or any writing moment that just had me had questions about how they were treating Asuka's character. Nevertheless, Asuka still has the same issue. It didn't escape my notice that while Homura and Miyabi were introduced to being a Kagura and being put on that path, Asuka still doesn't have an idea. But it's more than that. When you look at Asuka's team, we got some very interesting character moments from all of them. Katsuragi, her parents were discovered, and that put her in an interesting compromising situation. We had a very good moment between Ikaruga and her brother, and also Murakumo also coming at Ikaruga about her past, and we found out more about Ikaruga's past in the game. Then we have Yagyu. We actually get to see Yagyu's sister. We get the story of the eye patch in more detail, and even Hibari. We get the story about how other siblings wanted the power that she now possesses, then she had to try to become a ninja due to that power manifesting in her. But simply put, Asuka has none of that. No interesting backstory, no goal that's motivating her like the other three. If I'm being honest, I think the best way to put it is that compared to the others, Asuka seems a bit on the boring side. And see, therein lies the problem with Asuka. Even amongst her own team, you gotta ask yourself, why is Asuka the more prominent character? Why is she in the forefront? I think I'd be best served to show a case where I thought a good case of a main character was done. Neptune. Not expecting everybody to know the Neptunia series, and I'll explain what's important for context, but since they had a crossover game and they tend to be talked about in the same circles, I'm thinking there's a good chance people are at least familiar with. But the difference between how Neptune started versus Asuka. When Neptune starts out, we see a conflict between her and the other three prominent characters, her peers, the other goddesses. They decide amongst themselves that they want to take out the strongest, and they identify that as Neptune. So one, that tells us Neptune is considered to be the strongest goddess out of the four. Number two, after they gang up on Neptune and she loses, she ends up losing her memory and has to go through her world again, trying to reclaim her memory, remember who she is, and in the same process, save game industry. So that gives us Neptune's goal and a reason why we are focusing on her specifically. She's a goddess and she is trying to remember that she is one. She's going to be interacting with others, the other goddesses who know who she is, and by her interacting with them with a newly fresh perspective, because they've been fighting that battle for, I believe it was thousands of years, or it might have just been hundreds of years. I forgot the timeline, but for a long time, basically, Neptune can now come with a fresh perspective, and in doing so, she became the reason that they were all drawn together. In retrospect, Asuka started off known as the weakest of the group, or at least one of the weakest of the group. There were stronger members of her team, which he said constantly. Katsuragi, Ikaruga, and Yagyu just seemed pretty confident herself. Now that's not a bad thing. There's always a good underdog story, but they never gave us a reason to why Asuka went from being the underdog to being in the forefront. She had the greatest ninja, or good shinobi, that we know of to draw on from guidance and perspective and training and all that stuff. So if Asuka had all that and yet she still couldn't beat Katsuragi or Ikaruga, what's the difference? The game tries to tell us, especially at the end, that the difference is Asuka's reliance on her friends. But you see, that's part of the problem. When looking at what makes a character different, several things hurt Asuka, and that's one of them. I just said how Miyabi didn't really seem to have an issue with her team and, trying to get them all on the same page. It's just that two members were trying to betray her and take her out. But Miyabi truly did want them all to be a team. Homura's team, I think, has one of the closest relationships. They truly did become a family. They're living together, they share the same struggles, same hardships. And even in Burst Renewal, they showed a very cohesive unit. And then there's Yumi's team. They're literally a family. Even though some of them do have other siblings, they grew up together. And so looking at the others, it's like saying Asuka's strength is her friendship when I can certainly see the same thing, if not stronger bonds in the other teams. That doesn't separate her from the other leaders. So then is it her goal? Which is the next thing. Asuka still doesn't have a concrete reason on her goal. The Neptunia series manages to circumvent this by putting another character in the focus in each game. In the second game, Neptune was actually trapped for most of it, and the main character was actually her sister, Neptune, who her goal was then saving Neptune. But in this one, even after 2 games, we still don't have a solid grasp on what Asuka wants to do, while we do have solid grasps on what the others want to do. Which brings us to the main one in question, Yumi. And to the question of this video, does Yumi deserve to be the main character, with the other 3 leaders becoming literally in the bottom half of the rankings, and Yumi being the de facto number 1? 1, is that valid? And 2, does that mean that Yumi should take over? Well, let's tackle the first part first. There is one small thing that I think I've pointed out before, but I just want to point out for this ranking video again, especially since I literally just saw my girl Rukia do something spectacular in Bleach. I only have Bleach to go off on this. This is a very, very, very small sample size, but I noticed that in Bleach, the top 2 characters were characters who used the power of ice. I'm unsure if that's a thing, if the Japanese like characters who use ice powers, but I just thought I'd throw that in there as a possible, this might have a very, 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 very small sliver to do with something. But on the serious side, let's go back to the points that I've been speaking about before. 1, I mentioned how this can be the first experience with the characters that a lot of people have had. If that's the case, I remember my first introduction to all 4 of the characters. Homura did not look like much to me at first. Now, you don't have the option of selecting Homura when you start the game, but I'm mentioning Homura because Homura is now one of my favorites, but I didn't notice that at first. The ones who stuck out to me more, yes, you could say it's because of the fan service in question, but that's, I imagine, what draws a good number of people to this game. I can't imagine that not being the case, as much as people want to say that. So that being said, not only do Yumi and Miyabi showcase fan service qualities a lot more, I also think their designs are more unique. That's another thing about Neptune. I see Neptune profile pics all the time across YouTube with the certain faces and things like that. I can't really say there are too many characters that have looked like Neptune or Purple Heart. Either one, she can transform. But in a game where every character literally has, well, most of the characters have the same body type, things like that makes all the more difference. And I'm pretty sure it was intentional for Asuka to look normal, but I've seen that type of argument before. A main character really does need to look like the main character. It draws people in. And it's possible that the first obstacle was that Yumi was actually the reason people were being drawn in. I don't know about you all, but the Steam icon that I have of Yumi is of Yumi's chest. I didn't select that. That's what it puts out. In addition, Yumi and Asuka have a prominent portion of the screen. Again, it could be possible that Yumi was drawing them in. I'm not certain, I'm just throwing some stuff out there. And that matters because another point I mentioned, people might not play every route. There might have been a lot of people who just wanted to play one of the routes, went to Yumi's, and then decided that they were done. That could be one reason why Yumi's so high. But then I also like to go with the main character question. Excluding the final fight, which I did not expect there to be, when you just look at the main routes, if you were to ask me which team had the most impact, to me it had to be Gessen. One, Gessen was the absolute menace, not just in their own route, but also in Team Hanzo's route. They ended up nearly defeating them, and the only reason they didn't win is because Yumi just decided to back off. There was always a threat of Gessen, but not only that. Let's go to the new Team Heavy Joe route. What is Miyabi's team makeup? You got two other characters besides herself who are Heavy Joe based, but then you also have two other members who were former Gessen students. And the same reason, the same general vibe that Team Gessen is going after, taking down Evil Shinobi, that's why Ryobi and Riona joined that team. They also had their own Evil Shinobi that they were trying to take down. So in the main three routes, excluding Homura's route, Team Gessen has a very big prominence. And the leader of that school is Yumi. So let's go through those checklists. 1. What's so special about Yumi? Well, as the leader of the team who has been handing out beatings during a lot of this game, definitely would say Yumi definitely has the power. It's not just that she had power itself, it was also iconic. It's not saying the others didn't have power. In fact, I am inclined to believe that Homura being invincible is not just a game mechanic, it's also, they were slightly hinting at power scaling. I'm not sure. I don't want to go that far, but Yumi constantly seemed like a threatening presence throughout this game, but more so, the power doesn't matter. Like I said, underdog stories can happen. You just got to do them right. And I feel like a lot of people actually very much enjoy underdog stories. The thing is with Yumi, she had the more important thing. Yumi had a goal. And that goal was something that, while we all might not have had this happen to us, we can certainly understand why someone would do this or feel fury towards a group for doing this. Yumi's parents, as well as her entire team and her great-grandparents, she didn't know them, but still the idea exists, were taken out by evil shinobi. Thus, this makes Yumi want to seek out and take out all evil shinobi. And she sees Team Hanzo associating with evil shinobi, as well as Hanzo being related to her grandfather, and those two having beef, all stemming towards why Yumi wants to prove her way was the right way. But then, not just her, but her entire team go through different arcs where they meet the other two evil shinobi teams and they come to realizations on their own, thinking that things may not be as black and white as they seem, leading into their final confrontation with Hanzo, at least in their route, where they start to see where their point of view is and can work towards something better in the future. Now, I'm not trying to say that their route was the best. I'm trying to say from a character standpoint, whereas Asuka didn't really have too much of a character moment, Miyabi did have a backstory, but didn't actually, I mean, she grew a little bit, but it was mainly just realizing, I guess, what she had in her comrades. I don't know, Miyabi's is kind of tricky. But like I said, I think Miyabi would have been in the running if she didn't take out the other team members. And with Homura just being aimless until she's literally just told by Hanzo to become Kagura, Yumi's the one that I think goes through the most natural character development. That, as well as giving her a goal that she strives for and that she's leading her team towards, and her being amenable, because I think if Yumi had been stubborn and not wanting to accept the other two evil shinobi teams and that be different, but she did accept, she did learn, and realize that there might be more to this situation than meets the eye. In short, I think Yumi was the only one that just didn't have any pitfalls when it came to making a good main character. Even the songs. Let me ask you, which sounds more like a main character's theme? This? Or this? To be honest, when I first heard Asuka's theme in this game, I was like, what are they doing? If they even try, it doesn't get me hyped. I don't feel like this is the main character right now. Versus Burst from Renewal, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the good stuff. Asuka, which, come to think of it, the game probably was also marketed in Japan as well, so it's making me wonder if the marketing even favored Yumi. Like, look at the opening cutscene. Who is the first team we see? Guess. Who uses up a lot of the time in the opening cutscene? I haven't actually done the math, but seems to me, big emphasis on Yumi. In other words, the creators might have just done this to themselves. It's quite possible that people might have thought the main character in question was Yumi. Now, that doesn't mean that I think all of a sudden that they should have made her the main character. As much as I had anticipated when I was going into this game and arguing that very point, what I see is that the writers don't realize what they need to do in order to change things. They could have easily have given Asuka a more interesting backstory, or had Hanzo let Asuka do more of the stuff that he does that would help her become a very strong main character, because like I was mentioning with Neptune, she was the focal point for all of them coming together. Hanzo seems a big part in why Asuka and Homura are even coming together, or why Homura is going to become a Kagura, or, there's a lot of stuff that Hanzo's responsible for that if Asuka instead was responsible for, instead of having an interesting backstory, she helps people come together, then I think that would have been a very strong point for her being a main character. But also, I think that Asuka should have known about being a Kagura in the first place. Even Rin, who I thought Asuka was going to get some inspiration from, had some sort of a goal that she wanted to achieve. With the cheesiness of love and peace, sure, but at the very least, it was something, it was a goal. And even seeing Rin with that naive mindset run into the obstacles that, she eventually does run into, but see her try to persevere and still try to aim for that. And that would be something. But when your main character doesn't have a concrete goal, then it seems like they're just kind of wandering aimless. And I think that's actually the big problem with this. People mention that Yumi was the one who ruined things, but I think that the writers didn't have a clearer goal of where they wanted to be and where they wanted to end up at. And that's shown in how they write Asuka, because if they did, then Asuka should have been a lot more sure of where she wanted to end up in the first place. Asuka being unsure where she wants to end up seems to be reflecting in the writers not sure where the story is going to go. Homura and Miyabi seem a lot more prepared to make a transition into the next stage, however, I will say. And I certainly can't blame the writers if they're looking at this list and they're saying, all the other leaders are in the bottom half of all of our characters, while one of the leaders is literally the first and by a good margin as well. We'll see that in the next part of this video. Then yeah, it seems like you definitely should make that change, that Yumi should be the main character. And that is what I would recommend, but only if they knew why Yumi gathered so much popularity compared to the other three in this game. Now, I'm not trying to say that what I was saying is absolutely true. I'm just speculating based on the feelings that I've had. Though considering Asuka and Homura's position in the first game versus how they are now, I think I'm at least onto something. And Miyabi's seems pretty clear. I mean, you attack other characters, and especially in a waifu-based game, there's a good chance you'll be towards the bottom of the list. But it is my strong belief that Yumi seemed the most main character-like out of all these characters. And it matters because In most series that I see, the main characters are typically within the top 3 spots. It's very abnormal for me to see characters who are the main character and see them be so low. And I believe that's because main characters, you're supposed to like them. A main character is typically a part of why you enjoy watching a series, because the main character's goal is the original story you want to see play out. If we use Homura and Miyabi, for example, now it will be you want to see one of the two of them become Kagura for whatever reason it is. That's why you have so many shonen anime, and yes, I'm going to use shonen because this game seems more meant for the male demographic. Alright, I think we can all agree on that. Naruto wanted to become Hokage. Luffy wanted to become Pirate King. Deku was going to become the #1 hero. Asta wanted to become the Wizard King, Ichigo's more basic, wanted to save his friends, and Goku Dragon Ball Z has gone on longer than it was expected, but nowadays you have a lot more anime with their main characters stating their main goal, so you at least know what type of journey you're on. Yumi and Miyabi both provided that at the beginning of this game, but with Miyabi coming in the clash, that left Yumi the one as a comfortable option for people to choose. Now again, like I said, this is all just me speculating. I do think that they had a different path originally planned, because like I said, only the Hebijo leaders are the ones who decided or were told about being a Kagura. The good Shinobis were a little bit more up in the air on what their next moves will be. But when it comes to the game itself, I definitely have to say Gessen to me had the most impact, and their leader seemed more like a main character than the others did. So with that being said, we're still going to talk about the other characters, but please post your thoughts about this down in the comments below. Again, I'm not trying to state anything as facts. I'm just talking about the rankings and discussing why I think it ended up the way it did. So with that being said, please post your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will see you all next time.